everyone. Welcome back to another True Potential Do More with Your Money podcast. If you like your politics, if you're a bit of a political geek, 2024 is the year for you, because there's going to be an election in this country, there's going to be one in America, there's loads to talk about, and it's already hotting up and we're only in January. So to talk about it and what it might mean for you and your money, I've assembled my very own podcast cabinet around this very table. I'm joined to my left by Daniel Harrison, Chief Executive of True Potential, and across the table we've got Diane Pattison, Head of Delivery.
Hello there.
And unlike the Royal Mail, you're sticking to 6 days a week delivery.
I am.
We're here all the time for you. We're not cutting any back. In fact, we're around all the time, aren't we?
24/7.
24/7, whenever you want us. And Jamie Sexton's with us today. Jamie is Director of Client Servicing. It's good to see you all. Good to see you, Peter. For a political podcast, I'm very impressed that you've come with your party ties on. You're a bit blue over there. It's turquoisey blue, possibly. Bit of red here, bit of red there.
Well, I've hedged my bets up, Peter, because I'm wearing a blue shirt and a red tie.
So you stand for nothing?
Correct.
And that's a fence you're sitting on?
Like just about every politician.
Oh, it started well.
Started me to go on.
See where we're going with this one. Lots to talk about. I mean, I wanted to actually start before we get into some of the UK stuff. And the reason we're talking about this, we should say, by the way, is already in the first few weeks of January, we've had speeches from the Prime Minister, from Keir Starmer, on what they're planning to do or what they think they stand for. So there's already been loads in the news. But what's really dominated the news in the last few days is what's happening in America. And I wanted to just start with that because, in actual fact, if you've got an investment, say a pension or maybe a stocks and shares ISA, for example, there's a good chance that the biggest impact on that is probably what happens in America in terms of exposure to American markets and things like this. And if you look at what's happening in the stock market over there, Donald Trump claimed in the last few days that he alone is already should take credit for the bounce that we've seen in the US stock markets in the last few weeks. If people have logged in and checked their portfolios in the last few weeks, they'll have seen that they're in general up. I've certainly noticed that. You probably have as well. And he's already claiming credit for that. Have any of you watched any of the Donald Trump stuff, any of his speeches in the primaries?
I'm not quite sure Donald can claim credit for this yet. Certainly, if you track the end of last year, it was the last couple of months in particular, which was before the primaries had began. So maybe not quite yet, Donald, but I think certainly, Peter, you were showing me a chart beforehand about actually the impact of having somebody like Donald Trump in charge at the time in America and what that did to US stocks from there. And provided we have another run like that chart you mentioned to me, I'm not going to complain.
Well, just for those, I mean, it will maybe flash it up on screen if we can, but it showed, we were looking at the three American main indexes. You know, Jamie, because you're...
Both, Peter.
Whichever. Depends where you come from. The Dow Jones, the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ. And in the last year of the Obama administration, they were largely flat. And then as soon as Trump got in last time, they began to tick up. And of course, he comes with an awful lot of other baggage. We know that. But in terms of the stock markets themselves, they did perform well under Trump's last presidency. So if you are an investor, and okay, you're going to have, you might have other priorities as well. But, you know, and it does now look like he's going to be the next, or at least he's certainly going to be the Republican nominee. It's going to be a rerun of Biden versus Trump. And in the polls at the moment, Biden's not doing that well. So we could, Jamie, have another Trump presidency.
It's an interesting one because watching the few news clips of Trump campaigning and as other candidates drop out, they gradually just come behind him and he gets to stand in the videos behind him as well. As Biden has got the easiest campaign in his lifetime. I don't know. I've got American friends who are based in the South, so there probably will be Trump supporters. It's a really interesting sort of time over there. You just don't know. I think the thing about Donald Trump, you probably do know what he stands for, whether you agree or not agree with it. Not sure what Biden stands for in some respects, but I think it'll be really, really interesting. Really interesting.
I was going to say that the difference to me, and again, I'll caveat it as Jamie's done, rightly so. If you agree with him or not, so before anybody writes hate mail in saying I'm pro Trump or not, what he stands for pro-business. He stands for less regulation. He comes from a business background, depending on which bit of news cycle, either a great business background or a really failed one. But importantly, he understands what it involves to build things and to make money from there. And I think that's why you used to see a lot of his rhetoric when he was president the last time. And what seems to be the rhetoric this time is all about make America great again, MAGA, you know, as they say, from there. And I think that did help the stock market. There was plenty of other world factors, by the way, about why he did well at the time. But I think having a politician who believes in something and who's actually walked the walk is really important. And I'm sorry if I'm going to preempt some of
go for it.
What you're talking about there. You know, you look at a lot of our politicians, and a lot of them have been career politicians or career civil servants. You know, if you look at, say, Sir Keir, he's been a public lawyer and then a politician. I know Rishi, the pretended he'd done something in Goldman Sachs for a while, but he you know, if he'd really been in Goldman Sachs and really made some real money, he wouldn't be a politician now, because why would you subject yourself to all of that flack? And, you know, unless there's other motives involved, which people hint at. But most politicians out there have just been politicians all their lives. And then when it comes to ourselves as business people, or indeed the end investor out there, you try to talk them about what involves to run a business, and they that's very interesting. You know, that's good. I'll make a note of that. And, you know, I'm pro-business, or I'm pro-tax, or I'm pro-whatever. And then off they walk to the next thing, you know. So even our MP at the moment, you know, God bless him, Guy Oberman, he was ex-pensions minister. But one day a week he was working on pensions. The next he's up here in Hexham talking about a bypass. He was down where I live in Ponteland yesterday talking about the cycle path, for instance. And you think, like, well, how is that going to help galvanise the economy? And the answer is, it's not. I don't know why I've got onto that.
Because they're flaky, aren't they? I think the one thing that you can say, again, love him or hate him, about Trump is he says what he says with conviction. And I think not really I've got no certain market experience, not like I work in the investment management side of things. But I think you tend to do well if you say something with conviction, and then you've got a proven, like you've said, Dan, you've got a proven track record of actually believing in what you say and trying to achieve something. Whereas our politicians, I don't think they even believe in themselves. It's just they say things that I think they want people to believe, as opposed to any conviction.
I think you're right. And I think, just to echo what you were saying as well, Dan, whatever you think about Trump, and you know, this isn't the place to get into all the other stuff that people talk about Trump. We're just talking purely about the markets a minute ago. But what I will say about him is he gives people something to vote for or against, but he's very clear in what you get with him. And the lesson, I suppose, for the UK election that we'll come on to talk to is, do we feel like either of the main parties in Britain right now have given you anything to really get behind? Whether you either get behind in terms of you support it, or absolutely, I don't want that, so I'm going to look for something else. And that's what you need to do.
I'm looking for that, Pete, as a voter now, because I voted Conservative in the last election.
Hence your blue tie.
Hence my blue tie. And I haven't voted Conservative all my life. So, you know, kind of going through that. And I'm not convinced who I'm going to vote now. And I think it's what I would like to see over the next 6 months is some real, whether it's 6 months or whenever he decides to. We're thinking September, aren't we?
I'll make a prediction if I can now. I think the election in Britain will be on the 14th of November. Write it down. We'll come back and I'll tell you.
You've got some inside tips there.
Yeah, he has, because I saw that today as well.
I do have a theory, but finish your point first.
Yeah, but I think what I would like to see over the next 6 months from both parties is just some clear direction of actually what they stand for. You know, and hopefully what they stand for then follows through, because I think it feels very much at the minute where there's decisions being made based on a bit of party politics, a bit of doing the right for someone on a back bench or keeping in a seat, and rather than actually really what they stand for. And I'm not convinced that's what we're getting. And that's what I would like to see. I'm not, from a Labour perspective, with Keir Starmer, you know, be just interested in, well, you know, what are you about? What are your politics going to be? How's that going to affect me personally? How's that going to affect, you know, I've got views on, you know, myself, but also what goes on in the world. I would love to know that.
I think I think this is why, personally, those who campaigned for Remain in the Brexit referendum lost the argument because, and then lost the result, because whereas on the Leave side, they gave you something to at least get behind. Now, whether it turned out to be right or not, things down the side of buses, again, different argument. But I never felt that then the Remain side really sold the virtues and the value of remaining. Leave were very clear what it meant if we would leave. You'd get this, you'd get that, you'd get the other. Remain didn't make the argument. And I think to your point right now, where's the argument being made in Britain about what you'll get with either party? In America, it's very clear what Trump stands for. Last point on him, by the way. If you haven't watched any of his primary speeches on YouTube, they're worth a look. You might not be able to tell whether it's a spoof you're watching, some kind of like thing on, you know, that's been made for comedy. Because it's not always clear. He's got a very unique style of presenting, as you know. But they're worth a watch.
Well, it's very glam and fireworks, isn't it? And thank goodness we're not there yet. You know, they did try some of that during the Brexit campaigns and then during the last general election where you're starting to Americanise it a little bit. But thankfully we've pulled back.
He does this really weird thing where he reads like a bullet point off his auto cue. and then and we're going to cut taxes, and then he goes into a big all over the place speech around that, and then back to another bullet point, and then into another big all sort of tirade and speech. It's a really interesting style.
It's pretty a bit like I did before. Was meandered under our look.
You're not his speech coach, are you? By any chance?
No, I'm his hair coach, as you can tell. But no, I think Jamie makes a great point, Peter, as well, about now's the time to start figuring out what they actually mean and what it's going to mean. And I'll put my true potential hat on what it's going to mean for our stock market. All of our investors aren't just invested in the UK, which is obviously why you're talking about America today, the world's largest economy. And when America moves, like it did in the last couple of months, it takes the world with it as well. FTSE actually lagged all of last year anyway, despite all of our investors being up. Large part of that behind that, and Jeff and the investment team giving me a far better explanation than me, was because of the American markets, but also the currency hedging that goes on in terms of the price of sterling versus the price of dollars. So a positive American economy, which is thriving and doing well, is great news for the rest of the world and great news for our investors. But bringing us back to home, we're recording this on Wednesday the 24th. Today, what did we wake up to this morning? More Tory infighting on a year where, November the 14th, so only 11 months or so, Peter, now till the election, when they should really be making as many short-term benefits now to really convince people who, as Tory voters, as you maybe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jamie, but as Jamie's probably hinting at, where Jamie probably feels a little bit let down with what he voted in terms of, well, what have I had? You've heard me talk about this, where we've had a Tory government for, 10, 11 years now?
Longer. And I suppose it'll be 14 years this year, once we get the mail.
Well, there we go. So it's very difficult to say I'm better off as a result of this government. Maybe I am, maybe I am.
Well, you don't have the counterfactual what it would have been like the other way, do you? So that you'll never quite know. But do you feel better off? That's maybe the...
Yeah, I personally feel better off because I work with yourselves, I work with fantastic clients, fantastic advisors, and I've built that business up over since 2007. So when I was 17 years old in March. So personally, I'm better off because I was a founder of a business that's done well against a lot of odds, actually, and against an economic background which has been volatile, against a government background which has been, although it talks about being pro-business, it's very difficult to figure out where it is pro-business. You've heard me say again before, more regulations than ever before, more red tape than ever before, more taxation than ever before as well. And despite all of that, everybody in the room, because I know you all as friends and as colleagues, we're all better off. But I think that's as a result of our private endeavours.
It's in spite of them, isn't it? It's because of the instability. It's incredibly unstable. And I think if you want to look at that as a business model, as opposed to it being a government option, you would never look at that and think that's where I'm putting my money there because of the instability and, like you say, the infighting and the way that they just behave. It's like none of them are looking forwards. They're all looking back at history and what's gone wrong in history, and they're saying, well, we're going to put that right on behalf of the minority that might want to change in relation to something else. Whereas you come back to America and they do tend to, and I think it's in everything that they do, look forwards. They want to win. They don't want to look back. They might look back and actually take stock of what has gone wrong, but the way that they articulate themselves to the public is, this is what we want and this is how we'll achieve it, where we don't.
No, and the other thing which is different with the Americans is they'll have conversations like the one we've just had where we say we're better off. I think it's still a very British thing to be very coy about money and almost worried about, well, someone's just heard Dan Harrison say I'm better off than I was 17 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not, and then selfishly, I'm not better off. And you feel like saying, well, going back 17 years, me and others set the business up. We remortgaged our house. We didn't get paid for a number of years. Yeah. And that's a lot more natural for Americans to talk about, and a lot less natural for Brits to talk about. And I don't know if it's right or wrong. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's maybe quite a British thing. But going back to my point, which I started on and forgot to finish off, today has been infighting, and the way I read it is you've now got some Tory MPs who maybe can see a landslide on the way in terms of another party coming in, likely Labour. So they're starting to protect their own seats, which is, well, I'm going to push back against the government and I'm going to tick some boxes for my local constituents so I look okay, and that way I keep my job as an
And
MP.
probably also positioning for if they're going to go into opposition, who then emerges as the
Absolutely
new leader and the new people behind that. So
and then you just think, what a waste of 10, 11 months coming up. If you're just now going to spend the next 10 or 11 months acting like this, let's just get on with it now. And go back to what I was probably trying to say about Trump. Like him or love him, at least you know what he stands for. And I hate this stasis. I hate this waiting around. Because it's no good for anybody. You know, putting my business hat on again, I encourage all of you, and indeed myself, to make quick decisions. You can make quick decisions, you can get them wrong, and then the sign of a good business or a sign of a good politician is you say, I got it wrong, but I did it with the right intent. Now let's adapt and move on.
Yeah, it's an interesting quote from Elon Musk talking about Twitter, which he's on about like sort of presidents and senior people controlling their own Twitter accounts. And he made a similar point to what you said there, which was around you should just do your own account. And he said every so often you probably make a mistake, but who cares? At least people know what you truly believe in. And it's just quite interesting coming from such a obviously senior figure around the world.
Or just don't have an account at all.
Well, true.
I know. Donald Trump was probably one of the largest drivers of Twitter.
Yeah.
Back in the, until he got kicked off.
it.
Yeah, is he back on?
He is back on.
He has, of course, his own social media.
He does.
Truth Social, or whatever he calls it.
Yeah.
So. Is anybody on that?
No, surprisingly not. No.
Oddly enough, we're not.
I'm on Twitter, but I rarely use it anyway.
You mean, Dan?
I'm not going to that.
I've got to catch up here. Right, I want to bring it back to, you made a point earlier, Diane, about Rishi's 5 pledges. Talk about Labour in a minute, but what they're going to do. The dates, first of all. Let me tell you my theory on the date, just so you can hold this up back against me when I'm wrong later in the year. So we know the American election has to be on the 5th of November.
Yeah.
That's set in stone. The British one has to be held by, I think it's the 23rd or 25th of January next year, but that's when it has to be held by. But it will be held this year. My theory on the 14th of November is Tory party conference will be first weekend or the start of October. And I think Rishi will want to use his speech to say, when he's got all these activists and all these MPs with him, and they've had a few days of a shindig together, and they're all happy and friends, to say, right, I'm calling the election now, off we'll go. You then have to have 6 weeks worth of a campaign. Yeah. That takes you to the mid-November, and the first Thursday after 6 weeks would be Thursday the 14th of November.
Do you still think Rishi will be there?
Yes.
His seat being in his constituency.
No, as in, do you think
he'll be the Prime Minister?
Yeah,
Prime Minister.
Yeah, because it's obviously there's talk about that again today, which is you know they're going to try and push him out just before the election, but it would seem pretty end.
I don't think there's enough will to get to do that. Yeah. There obviously is a bit of a will, but not enough to make it happen. So on to what they both stand for then. So he made a speech the other week, but he actually was last year when he first set out these 5 sort of priorities.
Yeah.
And you know what all 5 are, Diane, because you told me about them this morning.
I did mention them to you this morning because I think that was one of the things was, what do people stand for?
Yeah.
And again, I think Boris, one-trick pony. But again, it was Brexit. He knew what he wanted and he went for it. And that's what he achieved. You put your mind to something, you've got a clear direction, that's what you go for. And Rishi had 5, which I think was to halve inflation, cut the NHS queues, it was to grow the GDP.
Growth. Cut the debt.
Stop the boats.
Yes. And if
it's
you look
a good little focus group, this, isn't it? For you might be watching, Rishi. Hello, Rishi, if you are watching. A good little group on it. And did we? How many people just have remembered these pledges? And we got all 5 there. So wait for listening now.
There were things that you could actually see. You could see them in your mind's eye because there were goals that he seemed to have that would mean something to the British people.
I think he's only achieved one of them so far, though.
Absolutely.
I think he was probably advised to do something like that. I'm gathering, but he was probably like, as in, you're going to have something you stand for, because obviously after the previous,
Well, he gave himself a scorecard, Jamie, which is what you I was taking the mickey out of yourself when we did the seminars, but you give yourself a scorecard which we shared with the advisors in terms of this is what you want to achieve. Going back to my old marketing background, you're always told the power of 3. So I don't know who give Rishi 5 things. People remember 3s.
Yeah.
True potential, simple, effective, unique.
I did this morning, so when we were talking, actually, I did say to Peter there was 5, but I could only remember 3 of them.
Yeah.
So he's only achieved 1.
Yes.
So far, I think
so far. He said at the end of the year, didn't he?
Which one's the one he's achieved?
And even then, has he halved inflation? Or was it the Bank of England?
But then it popped back up.
But it's still half from where it was, though.
Yeah.
They screwed that up themselves by putting up, not that I'm a smoker, but by putting duty up on cigarettes in the last tax. Yes.
Yeah.
So
Oh, wow,
inflation
of course
went
it
up,
did.
and you had Hunt saying, "Oh, it was all because of the price of cigarettes." And you're like, "You're the chap who put the price of cigarettes up just in October, just before the busiest time of the year when people probably do smoke the most as well, known as Christmas."
Stressful.
Yes.
Yeah. So, like, what do you think might happen, Chancellor? You know,
Let's look at historical stats, and what we'll do is we'll make a story around what might happen.
Yeah. You know, so. But again, what does that do? We lost, FTSE down this year is down about 3% to date, give or take. And it was ticking along. It was quite moribund the first week or two. We got that inflationary data out and chopped the FTSE by 250 points from where it was based on that inflationary data. So bringing it back, it's not just me ranting and moaning about politicians. This is where if they get things wrong, it can spook the market because inflation was just going one way.
It was, yeah.
So then you get Hunt saying, "Oh, did you know it's going to be choppy? At times it goes up as well as down." You're saying, "Well, you didn't quite say that 6 months ago. You said it was going to go on this nice smooth path down until somebody introduced extra duty on cigarettes and alcohol just before prime cigarette and alcohol season."
All the fun stuff.
Yes.
Good point. And then Labour, on the other hand, have got their 5 missions. They've fallen for the 5 trick as well. What was wrong with 3?
Well, they just want to be the same as Rishi because basically, well, to me, Labour are basically, we're not the Tories. So probably what they've said is, we're not the Tories, but we've got 5 better pledges than those.
It's working for them, though. They're 20 points ahead in the polls, aren't they? So, I mean, so just to put some context around that, for Labour to win, well, Labour, they're predicting a 12% swing for Labour to get a majority, which is bigger than what Tony Blair achieved. He got a 10% swing in 97 against the Tories. They're predicting that Labour would get, or would need to get, a 12% swing to get into, because they're coming from so far behind from 2019, where they fell right back. So was
Blair the largest swing? Was that the largest ever win?
Ever win? I don't know. I think there might have been a bigger one than that even in the past, but certainly in modern times anyway. 10% to give you that kind of landslide that everyone can remember. That was a 10%. He's going to need a 12, but he's 20 points ahead in the polls, which is, Blair wasn't that far ahead.
Without actually really doing very much. I think this is the thing. You're right, Dan. In some respects, he's kind of let them do the job for them. He's just sit tight, let them make mistakes, and just.
But when you see them squabbling again, like this morning, that probably just wins a free point for Labour.
And he's very, when he comes to the, to speak, he's like a typical lawyer in some respects. He's very articulate, answers his questions in a good way. But he hasn't really kind of, as I said, I'm not sure what he stands for yet.
But isn't that the danger? Do you all think, for the Labour Party? Because the more he says, there's a more chance that some people are going to disagree with him. Yeah. So isn't his best strategy, for better or worse, just to frankly say nout? And that might be terrible for us voters in democracy.
I think
if you were advising him, you'd probably say, look, you've somehow got 20 points ahead. Whether it's through what you've done or not is slightly immaterial. You've got 20 points ahead. Don't do anything, because it can only go one way from here.
Yeah. No, I normally agree. I think where they could make some real wins right now is starting to get people's mind made up. Jamie, again, he hasn't made his mind up. I haven't made my mind up. I don't know about Diane or yourself, Peter, from there. And I think what you may get is a bit of regret right at the end, just as you're about to put that X in the box. If you still don't know what Labour stand for, you may fall back into where you've historically voted. And again, Peter, I know this is your passion as well in terms of politics, in terms of there's so much people have always voted because that's how my dad voted, or that, and you've just, and if Labour aren't careful, if they're not clear, people might just say, well, I'll stick with what I know. I'll just vote.
Well, if those polls do narrow, and they will, because they always do when you get close to election time, if they narrow and he doesn't quite get that swing, and this is the next point I wanted to make, is we could end up back in hung parliament territory because Labour have got to come from so far back. They've got to first of all get to being the largest party, But that then puts you into hung parliament. You've got to swing through hung parliament and into majority. That's a big ask.
Yeah.
So we could, and this is a question for business, for all of you really is, what would your thoughts be if in 12 months' time we've got a hung parliament? Now that's a technical thing. Does it really make any difference? Well, it did. It made a lot of difference last time in terms of not one party not being able to deliver a majority. You ended up with compromise all the time. Some people think that's a great thing, and we should welcome a bit of compromise. For other people, it's confusion. You don't know what you've got. You don't really have what you voted for. You end up with a mishmash of a few things. I mean, I don't know what your view is.
That's what's happening anyway. Whether it's a hung parliament or not, we don't have any conviction. There's compromise there. Ironically, it's not really compromise. Like Jamie mentioned, you've got the Conservatives saying, we will do, and then Labour saying, we won't do that. And then you've got the exact same Labour saying, we might, and then the Conservatives going, well, we won't do that. There is nothing that either one is given that says, quite frankly, I don't care what that party says, that this is what they will offer. These are our true beliefs, this is what we're sticking to, and this is what we will offer you. So it feels like we're right in the middle of a hung everything.
And this is what I meant. This is what I was getting at earlier when I said, if we're not careful, we're going to waste 10, 11 months of this year. You obviously had Tories last year said about abolishing the lifetime allowance.
Yeah.
Someone like Jamie who's into pensions, great. That's great news for people when have these conversations. Almost immediately, you had Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves. We'll get rid of that. Yeah. You've had Hunt, like as he likes to do, just leaks everything he's going to do in the next budget, which is going to be about IHT being abolished. Yep. Guess what Labour said straight away? We'll just reverse that. Yeah. So you can't, as a financial advisor, which is what you are, imagine now starting to do some work on lifetime allowance with a client, and then also saying we don't need some of those trusts as part of your estate planning because the government are going to abolish it. November the 15th. The 14th is the votes. The 15th is the results.
Right. Okay, yeah.
On the 15th, the Labour come in and they abolish all of that. You've left your client with a potential crippling estate and pension bill.
You can only base your advice on the rules now, and it's really tough. I've had clients ring me up who are in excess of the lifetime allowance. Yeah. Currently, this minute in time, will not incur a lifetime allowance charge because they've got a fully uncrystallised pot. If they're asking us, can they crystallise their pot just in case it gets brought back in? So they don't want to take any money from their pot. They want to just effectively crystallise it. But if you do that, there's rules around your tax-free cash. It's got to be out within 12 months or you lose it. So there's difficult decisions to make during that period, and it's really tough because if you can't pitch your advice on something that a Labour government might do in 12 months' time, but you also can't pitch your advice on now. So it's really tough when I'm getting asked those sorts of questions because you don't really know what's going to happen.
Well, you do the right thing for the client today,
correct,
which you could inadvertently do the wrong thing for the client a year today. And that's difficult. And going back to the uncertainty point I've been trying to make probably badly, we just don't know what it stands for. We don't know how necessarily to give our clients the best possible advice. Going back to, I like to think our clients value us for being decisive and value us for having an opinion. You might not agree with our opinion, but at least you know what that opinion is, and at least you know what that advice could look like, and at least you know what our investment approach is all about. So it's darn difficult.
We talked about this on the podcast before Christmas when Sir David was on and Earl and Mark as well. But we talked about the fact that you had been to an event put on by the Labour Party, and the Shadow Chancellor was there, Rachel Reeves. So and I mean, I've never heard her speak. I don't know if Jamie or Diane has, other than on TV as well. So, but you've been in the room. You were amongst them for a few hours. Were you inspired? Was there anything that you felt you came away thinking that is the future? That I can see where we're going as a country. Tell us what.
I was disappointed, Peter. It was a North business leaders dinner. So most of the guests who were on my table who I was speaking to were very open-minded, as was I. I went in not as a voter because it wasn't my constituencies. I went in there as a business leader of true potential, wanting to know what this could mean for us in the room, everybody else in head office, but most importantly for our end clients and our end investors. And I was underwhelmed. I was actually disappointed because I'd given up an extra night. I'd stayed in London. I'd paid money to go as well, and all the extra expense which goes with that, to listen to the number two just be very vague about what this stood for. She mentioned her 5 pledges then, or 5 missions, whatever we said they were, of which she spent probably half the time talking about abolishing the VAT relief on private schools. To which you feel like saying, well, you're talking to a business leaders conference here. Talk about what your party are going to do for business leaders, not what you're going to do in terms of gesture politics to impress some red wall voters, because only posh people go to private schools. You know, which is like so it's lowest common denominator politics, which I really don't like either. You know, because bear in mind, most of those Labour politicians also went to private schools, as did Tories. I'm not even going to be for or against private schools within there, but it's not just for people like Boris Johnson and David Cameron. Private education from there, and all of the benefits which come from that tax relief from there. And I just thought, this isn't the gig. And where I was probably most disappointed was, Peter, I was told there was a bit more sense and a bit more kind of pro-business, pro-economic thinking from someone like the Shadow Chancellor, which I didn't see that night, unfortunately.
Right. Okay. I mean, it's just, I find it interesting to know as a business then, as business leaders, what do you do in this kind of year? Do you just have to let it all wash over you? We know it affects us. We know that the decisions for you, the reasons you made before, whatever happens, you know, the very next day, things could change. So it will affect everybody. And as I said at the start, if you've got an investment, you've got a pension, you've got an ISA, what happens here, what happens in America is directly going to affect you almost on a daily basis. So this isn't, we're not talking about this because it's, you know, just an interesting topic. It absolutely affects us. But as a business, can you in any way, you know, in terms of your board meetings, for example, I mean, are you factoring this stuff in, or can you not? Is there no way you can? Do you have to just get on with what you can do and you can control and let the rest of it just kind of happen around you?
Well, Jamie and I have spent the day in the board meeting today, and it hasn't been mentioned. Now, you could say, oh, why not mention it? You know, it should be part of a good, sensible risk framework or what have you. And you feel like saying, well, there's no point accounting for something which you've got no control over whatsoever. I have one vote. You three have one vote. Our listeners, our clients have one vote each as well. That's the most control we've got in terms of the outcome of the general election. And that's been the case for all 17 years at True Potential. What can we control, though? We can control what our proposition looks like, who we invest money with, who we partner with, what that proposition means to our clients in terms of the technology, which you've heard Jamie and Diane speak about for hours on end on these podcasts. We can control the price to our clients. To a large extent, we can also help drive good performance through as well, which we saw at the back end of last year when the portfolios in those 2 months alone made up for all of the losses and the volatility we'd seen earlier on in the years. Those factors are largely within our control. If we cross the Atlantic to, you know, President Biden versus President Trump, to use this, because you always have to call him a president, even when they're not.
Once a president, always a president.
Correct. We've got no control of that whatsoever, but we need to keep our agility. We need to keep working with our fund partners to make the most of the opportunities which go on in the United States and the areas around it. Ditto with the UK as well. So I think when you think about, when you're asking me, Peter, and maybe Jamie and Di have different answers, I control what we can. I plan for what we can control.
You have to drown out the noise. Otherwise, if you let external factors like that can be huge and have massive ramifications, unless it affects us directly, how can you possibly, like you say, how can you possibly take that on board? You'd have a weighted decision in one way or the other, and it would absolutely influence what you feel is impartial in relation to True Potential as a business. Obviously, you have to listen to some of the noise because you have to be guided by what may or may not happen. But I would say not to the extent whereby it does influence your business decisions.
You've got to, if you relate it back to investments, so this isn't the first election that we've had, and the stock markets have went through lots of elections, and typically we're investing for more than 5 years, so your growth will continue over that period. So when I'm speaking to clients around stock markets, kind of bringing about the business in a second, but when I'm speaking about stock markets, it's about staying in there long term. You know, don't make any rash decisions. Just carry on doing what you should be doing. And I think that's the same with the business. So we spent some time in the board meeting today talking through the client technology and showing some of our executives within there and some of the non-executives, some of the new annual suitability review process and how this was going to benefit our clients and what was the next steps and how we could improve for our clients. And we spent a good nearly hour and a half talking about how could we improve our service for our clients. That was done at a very high exec level. And that's the key things. That's massively in our control.
And from someone who sat in a board meeting from 9 o'clock till 4 o'clock today, Jamie, that was the highlight of it. And I'm not patronising, going back, you know, to yourself, because that was the technology which Diane and the team built. It came to life, and we could see the impact it would have on the client and the real positivity from it. Everything else, governance, ticking boxes, pandering to extra regulations from the UK pro-business government. You know, so that type of thing gets in the way of running a business. It heaps costs onto a business. You've heard me speak about this before, where we have to have layers of audits and checks and what have you. And of course, we should be responsible and check that people's money is safe, because it's the ultimate trust that we have a true potential to look after more than 500,000 people's pensions, investments, life savings. Of course, we shouldn't take that for granted. But when Peter's asking me, you know, in terms of what's happened, in terms of regulation, I'm doing more now than I've ever done before. And why? I'm not quite sure why. Because I know a client was as well off and as well protected 17 years ago as they are today. For all the framework that it's added. But what don't I like about it? That costs us a lot of money. We've got a proud track record of keeping some profit, but passing profit to the clients and sharing it. 17 years of our costs going down to clients and us reinvesting more from there. But the more regs you get, the more rules you have to follow, the more people you have to bring in to check on those rules, the harder it becomes to share those costs as well. And that's probably a thing we need to consider as a British economy as well as what do we want? Because I see Peter somewhere down here, we've got post office side of things down. And basically, I'm not going to get into the rights or the wrongs of the post office, but that was something which could and should have been dealt with in a minute. You know, it's still dragging on now. Maybe because people from the news have got nothing to write about. Or could be because politicians are fiddling around with something which affected a very, very small number of people. Now, for those number of people who were affected, I'm not being unsympathetic, it must have been bloody grim for them, and they deserve their money back, they deserve their name. But why can't you just do that in a day? Instead of all these hearings and everybody, I'm very sorry to hear it. You know, you've got the guy from Fujitsu, very sorry, and we're not going to have any more public contracts for now. You feel like you've got 200 plus public contracts. You've probably got enough.
65 million or something, I think, that they've got outstanding at the minute, is it not?
You know, so they're doing okay. You've got Sunak going, oops, you know, but like you've been like saying, you were involved with this just a few years ago as well. So just say, look, we all messed up. Going back to what I said before, to try to do the right thing. If you make a mistake, say, I wasn't meant to do that, here's what I'm going to do to make it right. But the millions of pounds which must be getting spent now on hearings could have went to those people.
But they know what happened. It's not like they're now still investigating to actually find out that they know what happened. It's been fundamentally proven. Like you say, Dan, just get on with it. Just absolutely.
Correct. And the bill for those hearings will be more than the compensation given to those people.
Of course it will.
Which is what I'm getting back to here. The bill almost for our regulations and governance will be higher than the amount we can give back to clients.
The real, well, part of the scandal on the post office thing is the fact that it took a TV drama. You know, because some TV producers decided to make it into a bit of telly on a whatever Monday night or something to bring it to get that level of. I understand from our point of view, we might have known, but the politicians all knew about this. But they weren't standing up having inquiries and standing up in the House of Commons going, it's a disgrace, we're going to absolve them all. They didn't need a public drama to do that on the telly.
Do you know what's good about that drama? Because everyone thinks it's like, you know, we're going to like colonise it soon. The Saint Post Office drama. Who was the boss of the post office at the time?
Well, it was that lady.
No, the man as well, the chief executive.
Oh, right, okay. Oh, it wasn't. Well, you tell me.
I can't remember his name. That's why I was asking you.
Wasn't the Crozier bloke? He used to run the FA, didn't he?
Yes.
Who's now in charge of
now the chief executive of ITV. Guess who wasn't mentioned at all in the drama?
Shocker.
Yeah. So the chief executive for the post office, now the chief executive of ATV.
Oh, wow.
Who had no part whatsoever in the drama. So just to give it the cynical view.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Surprised it didn't.
But he gets sued now.
Channel 4, Channel 5 then?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But again, it does come back to what do you believe? Because you can only believe what you read and what you hear, certainly from the media, and you have to choose your outlets as to what you think either aligns with your beliefs. But wherever your beliefs come from, is it because you've been peddled something and you've been pushed something? So you can be polarised in either direction. And when you've got two parties like we have at the minute with no direction, you are just left floundering in the middle, having to make decisions based on your conscience, what's right for the clients and what you think is best for your business. It's just no way to lead a country at all.
Well, it's an important point you make, Diane.
Thanks, Peter.
You made it very well.
Possibly the first time that's ever been said.
I'm going to draw to a close now and ask you a very direct question. And I suspect you know what's coming. Right, okay, here we go. In 12 months from now, right? 12 months from now, who will be the US president and who will be the British Prime Minister? I'm going to start with you, Jamie.
I think Trump will be the US president. And I think Labour will be in power. I think in the UK, I think people want to change. I think they're sick. And I think I just think it's the swings too much now. I really do think we'll see.
Isn't it interesting? Because I suspect you might agree. Would that
I
be
was
right?
going to say Kanye West for
America,
right. Just as that's the whole wild card.
There you go. Never know.
But again, I would tend to agree with Jamie.
Yeah.
Just based on, I think people are voting with the, I'm sick of I don't necessarily believe in them, but I'm sick of what you're doing and there's not really much else. I haven't got much other choice.
Yeah. Would you agree? Would there be your tips too?
I think a change is good. I think parties can become too entrenched and take things for granted and become too comfortable as a result. So I think the mood music suggests that people want to change. I think people are fed up with what's going on. They're fed up with the squabbling and the lack of direction. So I think it could even be just a vote for spite. Just even if you don't believe in what Labour stand for, you may say, I'm sick of the Tories, I want them out. I think you're seeing some of that in the home counties where they're going to vote for Lib Dems this time as opposed to Tories, which could really muddle the water. Muddy the water. I don't know, you can muddle the water just like that from there. I'm not sure the Trump is as cut and dried. I think he's making all the headlines at the moment. America have a very passive, quiet middle, liberal middle at times. I could see Trump getting in because people could say Biden's wasted his tenure in office. Because again, I know people call him Sleepy Joe and what have you, but it's very hard to know what his presidency has stood for, what they've really done of note. However, I don't live in America. You know, so I could get a pro-Democrat could come and tell me President Biden's been great because of these reasons. But looking at it as an Englander across to there, going back to our very starting point, at least we know what Trump stands for. It's very difficult to know what Biden stands for, short of I'm a good guy and I used to be President Obama's best mate, which is kind of what you see at times. So I think it could be a trickier one because also the hilarity with Trump is he can say it and do some stupid things.
Yes.
The other, and this is not me being flippant before I get in real trouble, both those gentlemen are old. And campaigning as they do, flying around all over the place. And actually, I can't remember what it is, but Donald Trump eats like 3 Big Macs a day. So he's a big guy.
Yeah, he is.
He's tall and heavy from there. His heart could explode at any minute now as well during campaigning, which could make it really interesting then. So a further prediction, which you could put an odds-off bet, is maybe either Biden or Trump doesn't even make it to the election. So I'll throw a bit of...
So you're going with Kanye West as well then, Dan?
Well,
is that where you're going?
I'm not... I think Kanye's not allowed to run.
But
Has he got a criminal record now?
Well, that might count him out.
I do.
I think if you do in America, you're not allowed to stand for office.
Which is why they're trying to pin one on Donald Trump as
Yes.
quickly as they can for anything.
Yeah.
I mean, if he's ever parked on double, do they have double yellow lines in America? Probably not yellow, are they?
They're red.
Double red
I
lines.
think
I don't know.
that's just a single.
Maybe
red
that's
line.
why Nikki Haley, who's the other Republican candidate, he's beaten in the two primaries so far. Maybe that's why she's just hanging on, even though she's got no chance.
Yeah.
She's probably hanging on the
youth on
basis
her
that he
side.
might not actually,
Yeah.
he might not actually make
May
it to
not
November.
make it to the
and then she's the
box.
de facto number one.
Yeah.
It is interesting that the same Britain and America have a lot in common, obviously, but a lot of the same economic issues that we've had, inflation, interest rates, and so on. America's about to go much more to the right, as we're about to go much more to the left.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Probably because people don't think of it like that when they're voting. It's
Yeah.
more the reasons you've said. But we're coming up with very different solutions to what are basically the same problems.
But based on some similar thoughts, which are the current incumbents a waste of their
Yeah,
opportunity.
that's what I mean. It's
Yeah.
people think
Yeah.
about it
Left or
very
right,
different.
you
Not in
know,
terms of
that-
left or right, but
Yeah.
in terms of I just want something different. You know.
Yeah.
But I think it shows, Peter, as well, and this is why it's very worthwhile spending the time we spend on America, because as I mentioned, it's the world's largest economy. From there, we truly are international now in our approach.
Yeah.
You can see the next problem coming up with the shipping lines again.
Yeah.
We had that palaver, so to speak, during COVID as well, and we had it when that guy crashed the boat in the Panama Canal and things, where worldwide issues do have knock-on effects from there. So it's no wonder we share some of the same issues as our American friends,
Yeah.
as they call us.
Well, I think, look, we're going to be talking a lot more about this stuff throughout the year because this is going to run on. And like you said, it's November will be here before we know it, but it always feels like a long way off to be all the stuff we're going to have going on politically in this country in America. So lots to talk about, and we will throughout the rest of the year. We'll keep coming back to this, whether you like it or not. This is the issue that's going to dominate your news and your news feeds and your TV news and all this stuff throughout the year. And we'll cut through a lot of that stuff you'll see, and we'll try to make sense of what the politicians say and bring it back to what it means to you and your investments. But for today, thank you very much, Jamie,
Thank you, Peter.
Diane, and Dan as well. Thanks very much for coming on. And thank you for joining us. Always good to have you on board as well. If you haven't already, but you probably have, but if you haven't, do hit subscribe to the True Potential YouTube channel. Give us a like, hit subscribe, because you'll get more of this type of content. And as things do hot up this year, we'll be here to walk you through it. So for now, thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.